Up ahead on Legislative Review. Cannabis use in controlled social events. And a bill that aims to address food insecurity in Washington. That's coming up on Legislative Review. Thank you for watching Legislative Review, your source for daily highlights in the state legislature. I'm Angela Nolasco. We begin our coverage today with a discussion led by a House committee.
Cannabis use has been legal in Washington for over a decade, yet we still lack safe, regulated spaces for adults to consume it outside their homes.
In a move that could reshape cannabis consumption in Washington, state representatives are reviewing a new bill that would allow adults to legally consume cannabis at special license events. House Bill 1932, heard Friday by the House Consumer Protection and Business Committee, would create what's called a, quote, cannabis consumption event organizer license, which would allow businesses to host events where guests 21 and up can buy and consume cannabis in designated areas under strict rules. Think bartenders, except they will be called bud tenders. That's according to the bill. Here's how it would work. Licensed event organizers can hold one cannabis event each month, lasting up to 3 days. At these events, attendees could purchase single-use cannabis products like edibles or vapes and enjoy them on site. But some rules apply. For example, smoking will only be allowed in specially designated areas with proper ventilation. Employees working these events would also need a special permit, called a, quote, bud tender license, to handle cannabis responsibly and safely. While the bill aims to offer a more controlled public setting for cannabis use, organizers will be required to follow strict guidelines for security, age verification, and keeping it away from public eye. There's also a focus on preventing impaired driving and protecting workers from secondhand smoke. Democratic Representative Melanie Morgan sponsored the bill.
Many people living in housing where cannabis use is prohibited, and millions of visitors to our state each year are forced to consume cannabis in public. This bill addresses the gap. It strengthens consumer protections by mandating compliance with the Liquor and Cannabis Board regulations, ensuring proper labeling, prohibits the sale and use of alcohol, tobacco, and non-cannabis vapor products at these events. It also creates economic opportunities, especially for small businesses and social equity applicants.
Proponents say it would provide a safe, designated, and controlled environment for adults to consume cannabis away from the general public and could also reduce the risk of underage use. Caitlin Ryan of the Cannabis Alliance.
Currently, there is no legal way to consume cannabis in Washington state unless you own your own home. By providing designated consumption areas, we can reduce the public consumption in unauthorized places. Additionally, HB 1932 presents economic opportunities for local businesses and entrepreneurs. We applaud the thoughtful approach to social equity as well. All of those folks here in town in our legal cannabis state wanting to participate and having no legal way to do that. I think it would be a missed opportunity economically for our state otherwise.
However, there's been pushback on these events potentially leading to impaired driving and negative perceptions of cannabis consumption events in certain areas. James McMahon of the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs.
We must oppose compounding our existing DUI problem with even more impaired drivers on our roadways. Our officers see firsthand the impacts of impaired driving causes on our roadways, and we also see firsthand the grief experienced by loved ones who are lost by DUI, because we also do the notification of next of kin. This bill, if enacted, would be the first in yet another slew of bills that further expand the opportunities for those to drive intoxicated.
Micah Sherman of the National Craft Cannabis Coalition testified on the bill's potential effect on the social versus isolated use of cannabis.
There's a lot of current literature right now about isolation and cannabis use disorder leading to depressive symptoms, that when social consumption is introduced in the equation, there's significantly less tendency towards social isolation and depression. Consuming with your friends is a different experience than consuming by yourself. And isolation and drug use are confounding factors. And so without the ability for us to have healthy social settings for cannabis consumption, we're moving down a path towards normalizing unhealthy use rather than healthy use.
Scott Waller of the Washington Association for Substance Misuse and Violence Prevention disagreed.
But intentionally allowing events where a bunch of people will smoke cannabis and then get in a vehicle to drive just sets off all kinds of warning lights and sirens for us. For us, the description of these cannabis events is like covering your eyes, the scary part of a movie. You know in your head what's going to happen without needing to actually see it occur.
We're going to go in to open the public hearing on House Bill 1987.
In the House, proposed legislation that aims to address food insecurity across Washington. House Bill 1987, heard by the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, seeks to create a statewide food security strategy spearheaded by the Department of Agriculture. This would provide a blueprint for ensuring Washingtonians have access to food while making farming practices more sustainable. To develop the strategy, the Department of Agriculture will collaborate with key state agencies like the Department of Health, the Department of Social and Health Services, and the State Conservation Commission to address issues ranging from food affordability to agricultural resilience. Democratic Representative Christine Reeves sponsored the bill.
We have families who are struggling to afford food. We need every single element of our food security network to be talking to each other in the same room, figuring out how we are going to maximize efficiencies across this network to ensure that farmers continue to exist, that food continues to get to the grocery store and to people's tables, and that people continue to be able to feed their families and to feed their kids.
The bill received support from the Washington Farm Bureau.
So we all know we're losing farms at an alarming rate. We know that food banks need more donations. We know that labor costs are high for agriculture and food costs are too high for consumers. I would hope that we actually kind of look from the bottom up and not the top down, get the people who work in this every day, that see these barriers every day, figure out what they do and confront them and work together to solve them.
No one testified to oppose the bill, which also received support from students of Lake Washington High School, food bank advocates, and the State Department of Agriculture. If passed, the strategy will be delivered to the legislature by 2027. Watch us every night at 8 and 11 p.m. and online at tvw.org and YouTube. To listen to our audio podcast, you can find us on Spreaker. Thanks for joining us tonight. To watch an entire legislative hearing or floor debate, check out TVW's archives for on-demand viewing at tvw.org.